how I paint snow bases. I'm using this on all the Indominus models from the new box set. And yeah, so here we go. First step is going to be to use Sterling Mud from Citadel. And we're just going to cover the whole base with it. In this case, these models have holes for the pegs to go in. So we just want to make sure not to cover that hole up, because the model will have to fit back in there. But otherwise, we're going to cover the whole base. We want to have varying thicknesses of the texture paint. Some places we want it thick, some places we want it thin. Obviously, the thicker you put it on, the longer it will take to dry. With the thickness I'm going to put it on, it should take about an hour to dry, give or take. Just want to get it, make sure you get a nice non-uniform look to it. You don't want to, you want it to look like dirt, believe it or not. So you want to make sure there aren't any patterns or tool marks in the dirt as you move it around. And as it dries, you can actually come through with a brush. I'm using a ratty old brush in this case, and just poke into it and give it some more texture. Probably when it's been about 10 minutes, when it's just starting to dry, you come back again and do this and just make sure that there's no smooth parts that are settling. So yeah, once that's done, you leave it to dry, like I said, for about an hour, and then you move on to the next step. Okay, now that all the texture paint is dry, we're just going to coat the whole thing in Steel Legion Drab from Citadel. This will give us a nice light colored dirt. I find for snow bases that a lighter color actually works better. If you use too much of a dark color, it can tend to look a little sort of too much contrast, I guess you'd say. Of course, it is dirt. It can be whatever color you want. But I tend to find that a lighter color dirt works better, especially since in our next step, when we put some shade on it, it's going to darken it down a good bit. So yeah, you just cover it with the Steel Legion Drab, wait for it to dry, maybe 5 minutes or so, and then we'll come back and do the next step. Alright, now that our shade or our layer is dry, I'm going to move on to step 3, which is some Grax Earth Shade. I'm just going to cover the entire base with this. This will give it some little bit of depth, and I'm actually going to put it on heavier than I might in other situations, because we do want some spots of very dark soil coming up through our snow. But because it's a shade, it will darken the whole thing down, but it won't make the whole thing super dark. So as you can see, we'll have some patches that are light and some patches that are a little darker. So we're just we covered that whole base. Now we're gonna put it down, wait for it to dry, maybe 15-20 minutes. If you want, you can use a hairdryer to speed that up, and then we will come back and do the next step. Alright, once all our shade is dry, we get to move on to what I think is one of the most fun steps of this process, which is adding the tufts. I'm using Army Painter Winter Tufts for this. I'm just going to grab one, put a little tiny dollop of super glue on the bottom. These are technically self-adhesive, but I always like to add a bit of super glue just to make sure. And then I'm just going to place them on the base. I'm going to make sure that all the super glue is adhered well on there. And then I'm just going to repeat this process a couple more times. On this size base, which is a 40 mil base, I like to have somewhere between 2 and 5 tufts. It's really up to you. You can go crazy and add more if you like, but 2 to 5 seems to work pretty well. It also depends on what kind of miniature is going on your base. In this case, this is a scarab base, so the scarab is going to cover quite a bit of the miniature. So I think I'm only going to go with 3 on this one. Just add another tiny dollop of super glue there. And I think I'll put this one here. Sort of like Bob Ross with these. You can put a happy little tuft wherever you want. Just make sure all the glue is stuck down. And then we'll set this aside, let it dry for 5 or 10 minutes, and then come back and do the snow. Alright, once we've let our super glue dry, I'm going to go ahead and put the snow on the base. We're using Valhalla Blizzard from Citadel for this. I'm just going to apply it with a pretty big brush. And I'm just going to make sure that I get it liberally applied to all of the base. Again, just like with the dirt, we want it thicker in some places and thinner in others, just to give that a little bit of visual interest. And we do want to make sure that we get some of the snow, some of the smaller particles of the snow, mixed into the tufts. Obviously, when snow falls, it would land on the grass as well, not just the dirt. So we want to make sure that we get some snow in there. And we just want to make sure we have it all over the rest of the base. Again, like the thickness of the dirt, you can really go as crazy as you want with the snow. I usually like to cover about 40% of the base with an actual full layer of white, and then leave the rest of it either completely devoid of snow or with thin snow on the dirt. I think that helps a lot. Make it look like an actual tundra or some such thing. So we're just going to tap that down in there. You see how in some places I have thick white snow, and in some I have very thin snow. The only other thing you want to watch out for is to make sure that you get snow up all the way up to your base rim. Sometimes you'll stop just short of it, and so it'll look like this very strange looking ring of dirt around the outside of the base, and we don't want that. We want it to look like the snow and the landscape goes off into the distance around our base. Just going to tap that in. Make sure we got enough in the tufts. And then the only thing we have left to do is add the miniature and paint the base rim. So I'm going to let that dry for a bit, and then I'll come back and do the finishing touches. Alright, my snow's all dry, and as you can see I've added the scarabs back onto the base. Now I'm just going to go and paint the base rim. Just going to use Abaddon Black for this. This can be a little tricky, especially on these scarabs, because there's not a lot to hold. But you just want to go around the rim of the base, making sure to paint all the way up to the edge of the snow and dirt. And work your way around. And I usually like to go around twice, leaving a little bit of time for it to dry before doing the second coat. Spin this here. Like I said, this is trickier on the scarabs than on other things, just because there's not a lot to hold on to. But there we go. Go all the way around, and then I'll leave it to dry for a bit, and then go around once more. And then once you're all done, you get something that looks like this. A nice bit of snow, some tuft, a nice thick color on the base rim, and a good old Necron to top it all off. That's all for this one. As you can see, it's pretty simple to get a basic snow or tundra base going. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.